My name is Diana, I'm 20 years old, and today I'll tell you about something that happened to me a while ago, but still gives me nightmares. When I started university, I became very close friends with a group who loved to do urban exploration, or urbex for short, which is about discovering, visiting, and taking pictures of abandoned places away from the city. You might think this hobby is a bit weird, but exploring such places really makes your adrenaline pump. It was a bit weird that urbex became one of my favorite hobbies since I've never been a fan of risky activities. It was Alex who introduced me to this world. He had explored many different places with his childhood friends. And before or after class, he would tell us about how incredible urbex was and the weird stuff they would discover. As well as some scares they would get here and there. Hearing that only made me more and more curious. I perfectly remember my first time doing urbex. We were 4 people and Alex was the only one with experience, so he told us we would go to a not very creepy site so we could start getting practice. If I'm honest with you, I must admit I was a bit nervous, but in reality, it was way more fun than I imagined. We visited an abandoned building which was left half-built. That place had nothing special, but it was a good start for us. It had 2 floors, but we couldn't get to the upper one. We found some piece of furniture that someone probably wanted to get rid of, a bunch of vines growing within the bricks, and a lot of empty beer cans. After that experience came many more, and more intense. I remember visiting a hotel in ruins, a faraway gas station, and a very old house where it was difficult to walk because of the garbage everywhere. All of those escapades turned out to be super entertaining, and we managed to create an awesome photo album. Every time we felt less and less scared, since nothing bad had ever happened to us and we never bumped into anyone. We always felt safe. Until that happened. One time, when class was about to start, Alex approached us. He looked very excited and said, "Guys, I discovered an awesome place, we gotta go check it out." He was almost yelling with his eyes wide open. He then told us about the place in question. It was a very old mall, very far away from the city. We would need to take at least 2 buses to get there, but he was sure it would be worth it. He told us that the mall had become a very famous place among urbex enthusiasts and was very talked about on social media. We researched it and discovered it had seen quite a bit of activity in the 70s. A lot of businesses operated there, but over time the mall started losing traction and ended up being abandoned as it was so far away from the city. We thought that place had a pretty interesting history, and the very idea of finding objects from that decade in there was pretty alluring. And besides, we were sure we would take a lot of interesting photos in there. So that very afternoon, we grabbed our exploration equipment and set off to that mysterious mall. As I mentioned, we needed to take 2 buses to get close to the mall, and even then, we had to walk a considerable distance from our last stop. However, once we saw the mall in the distance, we started feeling goosebumps out of excitement. It was an old building that looked really gloomy, and you could tell the patches of time on it due to the chipped paint and the multiple cracks. And that was just on the outside. We walked around the mall until we found a door on one side. We had to force it a bit, but managed to get in without too much difficulty. It really surprised us to see that the place was pretty clean. We were used to finding a mess everywhere. We also noticed that the place felt particularly cold and dark. But as I said, we had prepared our exploration kit and always had a couple of flashlights with us. Since the place was so huge, we separated into 2 groups. I would go with Alex to the 2nd floor and the others would explore the first one. We found an escalator which was obviously not working, but we could use it to get to the upper floor. We saw pet shops, clothing stores, restaurants. We went around the floor trying to open every door we found, but most of them were locked. It seemed like when those stores closed down, they made sure that nobody could ever get in again. At one point, I was talking with Alex when suddenly we saw a flashing light at the end of the hallway. We looked at each other with a confused expression. None of the abandoned places we had visited before had working electricity. We advanced slowly. Maybe there were more people there? Maybe homeless people? Once we got close enough, we realized it was an emergency light at the top of a huge door. Probably the entrance to the cinema. In that moment, I felt a slight sting of fear. But then I looked at Alex and calmed down. He briefly smiled at me and opened the door. The room inside was only illuminated by the light that seeped through the curtains, but it was enough for us to realize that that wasn't a cinema. There were office desks and chairs, blackboards, old computers, and a bunch of folders. However, what really caught our attention was seeing a bunch of figures placed everywhere. They were of a black cat with very long and disproportionate limbs. It had huge eyes and a wide smile with many teeth. Its design was cartoon-like. It even had gloves like some old cartoons. At their feet, there was a base with a badly written inscription that said, "Cartoon Cat." I couldn't help but feel a chill go down my spine. That was pretty creepy. Suddenly, a strong crack inside that office startled Alex and me. My eyes opened like saucers, and I turned around to try to find the origin of that sound. Alex adopted a defensive stance and prepared himself to attack if necessary. Maybe it would turn out it was homeless people after all, I thought, but that didn't make me feel any calmer either. I felt that the environment suddenly got even colder, and I couldn't help but shiver. And all of a sudden, we heard the same crack again. I could actually identify it now. It seemed to be coming from one of the desks at the end of the office. Alex was the only one of us who reacted. He took out his flashlight and placed himself in front of me as to protect me, and started to advance towards the desk. I was so scared that all I could think of doing was follow him from behind. We had taken just 2 steps when we heard another strange sound. This time around, it sounded like a diabolical growl coming out of the entrails of a monster. And all of a sudden, we saw it. A few meters from us, a dark figure rose up. Its body didn't seem human, and it didn't seem animal either. It had a huge head and extremely long arms and legs, just like the figure we had just seen. It wasn't necessary for the creature to show us its face for us to be terrified. A second growl was enough, and this one was even stronger and more infernal than the last. I noticed my knees were trembling, but Alex grabbed me strongly. From there on, my memory is foggy, and I can't explain very well what happened then. As soon as we regained consciousness, we rushed out of that place. We were yelling so loudly that we soon alerted our other friends. I don't know how I managed to keep up with Alex, go down the escalator, and meet up with them again. We rushed out of the mall and didn't stop running until we could no longer see it. I tried to explain to my friends what happened, but I couldn't find the words to describe the horror and distress I felt. That creature? Alex couldn't even speak. He had turned pale and was visibly nervous. We took the bus back to the city and went back to our homes without uttering another word. That same night, I had nightmares about a huge cat with extremely long limbs and a horrifying smile, chasing me without end. And the next night, and the night after that, leaving me thinking about that creature even during the day. For a while, Alex didn't come to class and didn't respond to our calls or messages. But I needed to know how he was doing, and if he had seen the same thing I saw that fateful day. So, a week later, I decided to go to his house to visit him. He opened his door with a tired expression and invited me to come in. He explained to me that since that terrible day, he could barely sleep and felt constantly exhausted and with no strength. I told him that my memory of that day was cloudy, but that wasn't the case for him. That's when he told me what actually happened. Just when we heard that horrible growl, Alex had his flashlight in his hand. For a few seconds, he directed the light towards that thing, but I didn't see anything. He described it as an unreal creature and that its body wasn't the most shocking part, but its evil expression. Its mouth filled with blood and its threatening teeth that seemed willing to skin us alive at any moment. Over time, I knew that image had been burned into Alex's eyes forever. I couldn't forget it either, although I tried to trick myself into believing I had just imagined everything. I still kept on with my life as best as I could, and the most curious thing was that a couple of years later, I found myself watching TV in my living room when an ad caught my attention. They would broadcast again an old cartoon that had been pretty successful back in the day. My head started to spin when I saw the slender figure of that strange cat who seemed to smile at me from the screen. Cartoon Cat's amazing show. It started to get dark, and I was just getting started with my work when a notification on my computer startled me. It was an email from Phil, one of my best friends. He would always bombard me with dumb things he found on the internet. I thought about not opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. "You gotta see this," said the title. I smiled. Coming from Phil, it could be anything, but this enthusiasm caught my attention. I clicked the email and a photograph appeared. It was a pretty disturbing image of an abandoned place, messy and very gloomy. There was an open door, and from there a strange black creature was peeking out. It looked like some kind of dog, although its limbs were too long, and for some reason he had a hand that made you think of old cartoons. I didn't understand why Phil sent me that picture, and he didn't give any explanation or context in the email either. I couldn't help but shiver. That image wasn't settling, precisely because it just didn't make any sense. But it was just a simple image anyway, so I thought nothing more of it and continued working. A few minutes later, I got another notification. It was Phil again. I frowned. I didn't want to see any more of his images now that I was focused on my work, but maybe he would provide an explanation this time around. Curiosity once again got the better of me, and I opened the email. This time, the message had no title. In fact, the email only had one photo where you could see the same strange creature in a very dim place. In the lower part of the photo, I could distinguish part of its head, elongated and stretched, on the ground. I could see the attributes of that creature a bit better, and instead of a dog, it looked more like a sinister cat. I would definitely stop opening any more emails from Phil now. They not only distracted me, but also made me feel uneasy. I guess he thought they were amusing, since he kept sending me more and more messages that I decided not to open. It was almost midnight now. I had 2 more hours of work left, so I got up from my desk and went to make a coffee. I was in the kitchen when I heard the sound of yet another notification. Isn't Phil getting tired of this? I ignored it and poured coffee in my cup. But then I started hearing an incessant stream of notifications coming from my computer, one after the other. And that's when I ran out of patience. Angry and annoyed, I went back to the living room to see my computer screen, and what I saw left me shocked. I had dozens of messages in my inbox, but none of them were from Phil. They were all sent from the same account, @CartoonCat. They looked like spam, and it was very clear I should have ignored them, but yet again, curiosity got the better of me. There was no message body in any of the emails, just a series of photos of the same strange creature as before. In the first one, the strange monster was standing up in front of a house with its mouth open and a disturbing expression in its eyes. The second photo looked darker, but you could still make out its demonic expression and its mouth full of blood. And then I saw the last photo. I was frozen in shock. No, it just couldn't be. I could recognize that place perfectly. It was my own living room, and the strange cat was peeking through the door. My own door. Its menacing face was looking at me with a violent and macabre expression. A drop of sweat slid through my forehead, and I slowly turned my head. And there it was. Its elongated figure stood up in the middle of the darkness of the hallway. It opened its mouth slowly, showing its teeth. I was absolutely frozen in fear as that monster let out an infernal growl. The last thing I remember was seeing it plunge towards me, and then everything went dark. Do you remember Siren Head TikTakers? Well, just like him, Cartoon Cat is another one of the multiple creatures created by Trevor Henderson. Its first depiction appeared in August of 2018, and although it may look like a normal cartoon, in reality, it's one of the most dangerous creepypastas created by this author. This character is inspired by the famous Felix the Cat, although Cartoon Cat is way more sinister. It is a giant black cat with a malleable body, long limbs, and a terrifying smile. It's very quick and very resilient. It is believed it can manipulate time and space as it pleases, and that's why at some point it made the jump from fiction to the real world. It can change its shape to confuse its victims, who it kidnaps and are never heard from again. It is said that it lives in an abandoned mall, and that its twisted smile is the last thing many see before it comes out of the photos and visits us in the real world. Nobody knows how to defeat it, although there are many theories out there. What is yours, TikTakers? What would you do if you receive an email from Cartoon Cat? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!